Drop a heart if this resonates. Comment yes below. Type 1 in the chat if you're still with me. You've seen it, you've heard it, and you've probably done it. I know I have. And yes, that is engagement. It has its place, but it's not what I mean by purposeful engagement. And today I want to draw a hard line between the two. Last time I told you where we were heading into the canopy, where the trunk we built in the last episode finally turns into the actual engagement and content your learners experience. Today is the engagement half of that. Welcome back to Learning Experience Design for Changemakers. I'm Renee Koster, Learning Experience Designer and Strategist. This is part 3 of the Roots to Canopy miniseries. If you haven't listened to the last 2 episodes, go back. We found your one person in the root stage, episode 6, and we built your A to B and your milestones in the trunk stage in episode 7. Today, we take those milestones and give them the thing that actually moves your learner through them. Purposeful engagement is not drop an emoji. It is not a poll for the sake of having a poll. Those things can hold attention for a second. And like I said, they do have their place, but holding attention is only half the job. Purposeful engagement does 2 things. First, yes, it does have to earn attention. That part is absolutely true. But second, and this is the part that sometimes gets skipped, it has to reinforce the exact thing you are teaching. If it doesn't reinforce the milestone in front of it, it's going to end up decoration, not design. So here's the test I want you to run on every piece of engagement you build from now on. What is this actually reinforcing? If you can't answer that in one sentence, it's not purposeful yet, but it can get there. And here's something I've been sitting on since the last episode. I mentioned that saving all your action taking until the end of a learning experience can cause some real problems. And I said that we would get into it. This is that episode. When engagement is decorative and backloaded, when the only real doing happens in a final project or a final test, your learner spends the whole experience absorbing information, and none of it actually sticks until the very end, if it sticks at all. Purposeful engagement has to live inside every milestone, not just at the finish line. Before we move on, I want you to actually do something, not just nod along. Think of one training or onboarding process or online course that you are responsible for right now. Something you already run, not something hypothetical. Got it in your head? Good. Now ask yourself, where does the actual doing happen in that experience? Is it spread through the whole thing, or is it stacked at the end? Hold on to your answer, because we're about to walk through 2 real examples, and I want you comparing them to your own as we walk through them. Here's where I want to push back on an assumption. We tend to think that purposeful engagement matters most for the exciting stuff, the flagship course, the signature program. But the learning experiences that feel the most boring, the most, let's just get through them, are usually the ones that need this the most. I'm talking about onboarding. I'm talking safety training. I'm talking the training nobody wants to sit through and nobody remembers a week later. Let me give you a couple real scenarios because I don't want to leave this abstract. Here's the situation. You've had real safety violations, real incidents. Maybe someone's gotten hurt. Maybe there have been some close calls. Workers show up to the training, they're not skipping it, they're in the room, and a week later, you are watching the same exact mistake happen again. That is not a compliance problem. That's a design problem. Here's what typically happens in that room: a slideshow, a policy read aloud, a sign-in sheet. Nobody in that room is doing anything except sitting there. And nothing in that room connects to their specific station or their specific risk. And that is the gap. And here is why that matters. I mean, really why, not the compliance department version of why. Someone in that room could get hurt or hurt someone else because a slide didn't stick. That's not a dramatic way of putting it. That is the actual literal stakes of a training that doesn't work. This isn't about checking a box so the training's done. It's about the fact that whatever didn't land in that room is going to show up again and again on that floor next week and the week after, exactly the way it did last time. So let's rebuild it with milestones. Milestone 1 isn't the know the safety policy. It's recognize the exact hazard as it shows up in their own workspace. The action tied to it, not a quiz question, an action, is having each worker walk to their own station and point out loud the specific spot where this exact violation happens. Not a hypothetical spot, their spot. Milestone 2 is knowing the correct action and why it protects them specifically. This is where you tell them a real story. The actual near miss, the actual consequence with real stakes. Not a generic safety video from a stock footage library. Then the action. They physically demonstrate the correct procedure once, right there, out loud, or with their hands, not, well, we told them what to do. They did it. And milestone 3 is commitment, because a safety culture doesn't hold if it's only top down. The action here is each worker says or writes one specific sentence. If I see someone doing this, here's what I'll say. Here's what I'll do. That's pure accountability built into the training itself, not a poster on the wall. And there could be pushback on this. Well, nobody wants to actually go through a training like that. Quite possibly that's true. But I also know it's true that they don't want to sit through another one of those videos. Notice what didn't happen. Nobody dropped an emoji. Nobody clicked acknowledge. Every single engagement moment reinforced the exact hazard, the exact correction, and the exact commitment for their specific workplace, not a hypothetical one. That's the difference between a training people sit through and a training that actually changes what happens on Monday morning. Second scenario, you run a nonprofit, and every summer you get a fresh group of high school and college volunteers or interns. Same onboarding every year, and you need two things. It has to be efficient enough that you're not rebuilding it from scratch every June, and it has to actually be fun enough that this cohort finishes it instead of drifting off after day one. Same milestone approach, different content, because the milestones aren't generic. They're specific to what a first-time teenage or college-age volunteer actually needs. Your milestone 1 is buy-in. Do they actually understand why this place matters? Skip the mission statement slide. The action here could be a short scavenger hunt around your site. If they have to do this training beforehand, have them do a scavenger hunt on your website. Find and photograph 3 things that connect to a real story you tell them, or have one current staff member tell them one true story in person. They're moving, they're looking, and it's reinforcing the mission, not just reciting it back. Milestone 2 is their actual role, done safely and correctly. Same principle as the safety training. Don't hand them a manual and hope. Have them do the task once, in front of someone, the same day. A show me moment, not a read this moment. Milestone 3 is knowing who to go to. Instead of ask your supervisor if you have questions, have them literally meet that person and exchange contact info in the room. That turns a vague safety net into a named real person they've already spoken to. The engagement design here should lean into what actually works for this age group. Teams, a little friendly competition, visible progress. A checklist or badge for each milestone completed gives them something to see themselves finishing, which matters when you're trying to keep an 18-year-old's attention through onboarding. And because you built this around milestones, you're not redesigning it every summer. You're running the same system with a new cohort, which is exactly the kind of designer benefit we talked about in the last episode. So why does this matter? In both of these examples, the engagement wasn't there to make training more fun for its own sake. Yes, that's a byproduct. That's what we aim for, is for them to enjoy the learning experience. But what it really did was every single moment was reinforcing one specific milestone. That's the whole test. Fun without reinforcement is still decoration. Reinforcement without any real engagement is a lecture nobody remembers. You need both jobs happening at once. So here's where we've landed. Purposeful engagement does 2 jobs. It earns attention and it reinforces the exact thing you're teaching. And it has to live throughout the experience, not just at the end. Whether that's a safety training or a volunteer onboarding, the same milestone-first approach applies. Name the milestone, then build one engagement moment that makes it real. Next time, we finish the canopy and talk about content, how much you actually need and why less is usually the right answer. If this gave you something to rebuild in your own onboarding or training, hit follow so you don't miss part 4. And if you want to tell me what training you're rethinking, you know what to do. Reply to any email from me with podcast share in the subject line. Not on the newsletter yet? Go to www.reneekoster.com/newsletter and sign up there. Thanks for spending this time with me, and happy designing.